The book has 3 goals. This book is called The Modern Loss Handbook, an interactive guide to moving through grief and building your resilience. And it has 3 goals. The first is to help you stay connected to the person that you lost, and we'll talk about that. The second is to help you stay connected to yourself, because as I was just saying, you feel like you're kind of this new person, but you're actually not. It's just a new side of you. You need to figure out how to stay connected to your mind and your body when you're moving through loss. And the third is you have to figure out how to stay connected to the world around you. And part of that is your interaction with others. You still have to talk to people and navigate your friendships and your professional relationships and your intimate relationships. And some of those are going to result in some pretty crappy exchanges. There will be people who, and you all know what I'm talking about, who give you, say, a lot of platitudes, who try and kind of make you feel like what you're feeling is not valid. You know, at least you had a great relationship, or you can always get pregnant again. Or people say this, and you know, in my mom's case, was she wearing a seatbelt? And I was like, how is that even remotely helpful to discuss right now? Like, yes, my mom died in a car accident. And yes, she was wearing a seatbelt, because you can still lose your life wearing a seatbelt in a car accident. And I think that we are just so out of, yeah, let me just finish what I'm saying first. I think that we just do such a poor job of normalizing this in our conversation that we don't do any favors to the next person who's either going to go through it or going to need to support someone going through it. So we keep on having these platitudes trickle down. And then there's something to be said for toxic positivity. I think we all know what I'm talking about. The people who are always like, no bad days, you know, just look on the bright side. You've been in this so long, it's time to get over it. These are all incredibly hurtful things to hear when you're moving through grief, and not just in those first month or year, but even in the years afterwards. You want to feel acknowledged in the fact that what you're going through is legitimately hard. If it feels like a real thing to you, it is. Who's to say otherwise? And so there's a section in the book where I literally give you some prompts about some of these things that people will say to you, and they will, you know, maybe not all at the same time, but in succession over the course of your, you know, arc with living with loss. And I ask you to think about, like, what is it that you would ideally love to say to somebody when they say, you know, well, you can always get pregnant again. You know, how many of us are in these moments where we feel like taken aback, and then we don't say anything because we're really stunned. And then afterwards, we get really upset because we feel like we didn't advocate for ourselves. We feel like we weren't able to share how we really felt. We weren't able to teach that person what would really help us in that moment. And so I kind of give you these prompts so that you can think through it in advance and then maybe be ready. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, if you like, you can always get pregnant again. I have had friends, many people I know in the modern loss community who have had miscarriages and stillbirths and say, you know, I understand that may be a fact. Like, maybe I can get pregnant again. However, in this moment, like, I'm grieving, you know, my pregnancy, I'm grieving my baby. This is not about that. This is about the fact that I lost somebody, and this is my focus right now. Like, I'm not really focused on like the future. I would like you to recognize that I lost somebody here, and this is who I'm focusing on. I mean, I think that the more we do a better job of, like, you know, standing up for ourselves and kind of sharing our narratives with the world, then the better job we're going to do at teaching the world how to, you know, not only support us, but also, you know, how they can stand up for themselves when it happens to them, because it will. And in terms of, you know, showing up for people, I always say that there are so many things that we do that are wrong, like so many things we say that are wrong around people who are grieving. And I could go on for a long time about that, but I just gave a lot of examples. But I also say that it's actually quite easy to provide meaningful support, meaningful verbal support. And a little trick is that if you're at a loss for what to say, sometimes that's the best thing to say. Like, I wish that I had the perfect words for you right now. I wish I had the perfect fix. I wish I could take away everything that you're going through, but I can't. But I care about you. I'm here. I'm here to listen. I'm here to, like, go for a manicure with you. I'm here to, like, mow your lawn with you, or, like, take your kids so you could shower. I'm here to do this stuff. And if it's not today, I'm here next week and the following week and the following week. Just showing up and following through for someone in whichever way feels like natural to you will go a long way with somebody.
I had a friend who lost her husband in the fall of 2020, and I had said to her a couple times, "You're so strong." This third time I said it, she goes, "Hitha, I don't want to be strong. Like, I know you mean well when you say this. I don't want to be strong. I want my husband."
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for her for telling me that what I thought was a well-intentioned thing to say was actually the wrong thing for her to hear. And that shut me up. And I'm very careful now about saying things that sound good in my head, because it's not about me, it's about the other person. And I have tried to normalize, I'm at a loss of words.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to just be here with you.
And isn't it so much easier? Like, it's easy to be like, I literally don't know what to say. I don't have the magic words, but I care about you. And like, by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying you're so strong to your friend, because this is the stuff we say. This is the normalized stuff that we're used to talking about. So of course that's what you're going to say. What was awesome is that your friend was like, I don't want to be strong. Like, I really want to be in a snotty heap in my bathroom. Like, that is what I need right now, and I need my husband back. Like, I don't want strength. And you listened, and now you don't do it anymore. Like, that is the important thing, not the fact that you did it. And so, I mean, I think that sometimes, in our culture, we talk about powering through things and being, vanquishing, like, grief or the hard things in life, and like, like with science, like we're at war with adversity, and we're just like not at war. Like, we don't have to be strong. We don't have to like, go into battle. We just need to like move. And sometimes we move in different directions, and we look wonky, and we look awkward, and we look messy, and we fall to a heap, but that's okay. Like, this is part of the experience.
Humor is another one of those things that we don't think can be a part of our grief journey, particularly at the beginning of a grief journey, but it has been a saving grace in my own, as well as many others who have loved and lost people very, very dear to them. What are some of the other false narratives around grief that you can't laugh and you can't find humor, or you should say this, you shouldn't say that we have been normalized to believing is the right thing to say or do? And how do we start recognizing what could actually, while well-intentioned, may not actually be helpful, and start to unlearn some of these things? I
mean, I think the way that we start unlearning is when we are willing to listen to like conversations like these, really listen, not just like, half-listen, but like absorb and hear, oh, like Hitha said to a friend that she was so strong, and the friend said that wasn't helpful. Okay, maybe that's what I'm not going to do next time. And so then we can get better at helping others. But then also, as people who are going through hard things, we need to get better at figuring out what we need. And we don't have to think about what we need over the long term. No one knows that. We have no idea what's happening next week. We just need to think about, like, what do I need today? Like, how am I feeling today? My mom died, my partner died 4 months ago. Where am I at today on Thursday? What do I want to do this weekend? Like, what's going to make me feel okay? Is it like going to my friend who is like the go-to for making me laugh? Is it hanging out with someone who's super anal and can help me do a logistical project that I've been dreading, like going through a closet or whatnot? Is it raging? Is it like going on a bike ride or like doing a class or something? You just have to check in with yourself along the way. And like, that is the best way to move through grief, which is knowing that this whole thing is just like one marathon, and it's also a 24/7, 365 experience. There's no rush to like get it over with. Like, you're always going to be able to do it differently, because grief is a very dynamic thing, because you're alive, and so it's a living thing. When it comes to like joy and humor, I feel like there's a lot of judgment around, oh, like she's being so glib, she's laughing, like she's making like a gallows humor joke, like she's making fun of the person or whatever, that's disrespectful.
Or she's dating again.
And I actually love that you brought that example up, because I actually remember, I don't know why specifically, I remember Sheryl Sandberg when her husband died. And then I think it was several months later, she was on a date with someone, and there was, she's a very public figure, and there was chatter like, wow, that's early. It's like, who cares? Like, literally, who cares? Her husband died traumatically. She has children. Like, also, it doesn't even matter. We don't even have to like make excuses. She has every right to do what feels right. As long as it's not hurting her or anybody else around her, who cares? Like, why do we care how someone else lives their life? Is it because it makes us more comfortable? Is that what makes us more comfortable, or do we just want to let people kind of like fly their flag as long as that flag is like totally innocuous? I can't stand the judgment that surrounds experiences like grief and loss, because what we can't seem to absorb yet is that it's a highly individualized experience. Even if you have two people who are grieving the same person, they're gonna grieve them differently. You could have two siblings grieving a parent and the relationship is different. Like maybe one thought mom favored that kid, or there was resentments or whatever. And so we just have to understand first and foremost that like everything is apples to oranges here, even within the same like loss of the same person. And you've gotta let the person do their thing. You've gotta let them do what's right for them, and you've gotta lay off of them. You have to encourage them. If it looks like it's helping them, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's not hard to like not be a roadblock in someone's life.
As someone whose sun sign is a Cancer and is also a sucker for a metaphor, I really love how you encourage your readers and your community to think like a crab.
Yeah.
Can you share what that means and how you think and act like a crab?
So I like never thought in my life that I would be talking about crabs so much when I came up with that idea. And so I briefly alluded to it a couple minutes ago, but I was saying that, just we keep talking about like when you read an obituary, they lost their long battle with cancer, right? Or they fought valiantly. And it's like, what the hell does that even mean? Like, does someone who died quickly from cancer or like died in the end, like does that make them like less valiant, or if they struggled more or suffered more, like is it a thing where we're supposed to be brave and valiant when we're doing things that are so overwhelmingly painful and cause suffering to us and those around us? Like, this is just not the metaphor that I really like. I also think that it plays into what you said to your friend, which is you're so strong. Strength doesn't really have anything to do with this. Like we're all strong. We can all handle hard things. Some of us just don't know what we can handle until we're served a life experience that forces us to level up and come through for ourselves and figure out like how do we make ourselves more resilient. Like I feel like I need to grow like this much. Like how can I get there? What do I need to do for myself to get there? And so I suggest the crab metaphor instead of the desert storm battling metaphor, which is okay. So I learned a lot about crabs. So the horseshoe crab is the most resilient creature on the face of the earth, and also it's an animal. And also it's not really a crab, but semantics. Like I liked the metaphor, and so it's very resilient. It's outlasted humans. It's outlasted all of this stuff going on in the world, and it's still around. And then you think about all these other crabs, right? Like sand crabs, hermit crabs, all these. I mean, just think with me about crabs for one moment that you never thought you'd be doing at 12:30 on a Tuesday. And they're very flexible, right? Like their only job is to hang tight at the bottom of the ocean when the tides are shifting and the sand is moving underneath their feet, and just hang on and figure out a way. And a lot of the times that forces them to be very flexible. They have to use fancy footwork. They may be on the sand on the beach. They can move sideways. They can move forward, backward. They kind of just pivot in order to keep their balance somehow. And they find a way. That's like their only job, And they don't care. They look super weird. The crabs are like the weirdest things ever, right? Like you watch them and they look super wonky, and they don't care. A, because they're crabs and they probably don't have a lot of self-awareness. And B, they just get stuff done. And I feel like that's such a better metaphor for like moving through adversity, because you're gonna look wonky sometimes. You're dealing with something that you've never dealt with before. And so it should feel foreign, it should feel scary. And you're gonna mess up, you're gonna fall down, you're gonna look like an idiot. And that's okay, you just try again. And so I feel like there's no winning or losing, there's just doing. And so that's why I came up with the crab idea. And hopefully that will catch on a little bit.
I love it. I'm going to put like a crab on my vision board.
Please do.
It's going to be because of you.
I'm wearing these bird earrings, and someone was like, you need crab earrings. And I was like, maybe I do.
Bobble Bar makes some really cute ones.
I might have to. I'm like a Jewess, but I am not kosher. So I feel like, we're not talking about eating crabs. We're talking about like, admiring them. So.
There are a lot of questions in the first part of the book, the ones that help you stay connected to your person as you write. So some of them are very heartwarming. What was their proudest moment or their biggest idiosyncrasy? but others are really hard, such
Yeah.
as asking people to think through the times when they or their person should have apologized but didn't, or if there are any regrets or resentments. What is the point of including all of these questions and maybe just not the positive ones?
Right. I mean, I think that we tend to, when someone dies, there is a tendency to put them on a pedestal. Why wouldn't you? Like, they're not around anymore, so they can't defend themselves. So in theory, it's very polite of you. But like, we're all human. We're all humans, grieving humans. You know, we mess up, we screw up, we're not perfect. And so when somebody dies, we're hesitant, and unless they're like, you know, like an infant or a child, you know, like we're very hesitant, like, to talk about the ways in which they were very imperfect. And I think that's a mistake. And I will say, I'm not a therapist. Like, I'm not somebody you should come to for therapeutic advice. But I do run a community of thousands of people around the world who have learned, you know, the hard way that if you only embrace like the positive stuff, that is actually toxic positivity to yourself. You're only doing the no bad days and like the just prayer hands. You're literally doing that to yourself. If you're not looking at the underbelly of a relationship, if you're not remembering that like you wish that they would have apologized for something and you're never going to be able to talk about that with them, or if you wish that you would apologize for something, or you know, if there were any resentments or if there were any hurt caused or real damage, this, I would argue, is sometimes more important to think through and remember and coax to the surface than like, you know, like their favorite color was blue, like, I mean, which is nice to know, like, great, blue. But like, this is the stuff that you might want to think through that you can take to a mental health provider and say, you know, this stuff came up and I'm kind of feeling this emotional charge when I wrote this answer. I wonder if maybe I should talk about it, because the thing is, even if I don't ask you this, it's still in you. It's still going to be in you, and it's going to come out somehow. And it's better to come out like in a protected setting or as you're thinking it through than like, you know, kind of simmering for years. And then maybe you either make the same mistakes or you're not mindful of it. You know, like you deserve to live a really rich life, and part of that richness is going to come from taking a good hard look at some of the hard things.
I know that exercise has been really helpful for me. I lost a cousin who was really like more like a little sister to me in a car accident 5 years ago. And I'm still, like, there are days where I still want to call her and I still want to talk to her. And there are moments where I'll look back and go, that fight, I'm still holding on to that stupid argument, or I'm holding on to a really hard moment that the whole family was brought into, and second guessing if I had done anything differently, which even in the car that night, would she still be here, and drive myself crazy. So I have to tell you, those exercises in particular have brought me such peace and something to talk about with my therapist when they do come up, because it's been 5 years. Those feelings haven't gone away.
No, I mean,
they never will.
And those are really hard feelings. I mean, there are so many what ifs. I mean, my mom died in a car accident. Don't you think, what if I saw her an hour beforehand? Like, what if I just asked her to stay for a while, or this and that? So many things over which, A, we have no control, and B, are literally not our fault. Like, it's just headspace that we're taking up, and it's destructive. And so that's why I do suggest, like, hey, like, this is all important stuff to think through, but this is it's just me, it's Rebecca. Like, I'm just like asking you the question. You might want to do something with these, and that's why the very next section is the staying connected to yourself, in which I have a whole, you know, primer on different therapies out there. Now, again, it's not a therapy book, but I do think that some people who are grief newbies are resistant to therapy because they've never done it before. They feel like it's a stigma because they're not being strong enough. So why do they need a therapist? Like, they should be stronger than that. And it's like, no, let's be honest. We're in like New York. Everyone should be in therapy. Can we just like agree? Literally everyone, and particularly people like, you know, who probably never will. Putin. So I feel like it's just really important to give a primer on like the tried and true therapies, because there are a lot of trauma therapies out there that people might not be familiar with. So I go into like things like EMDR, which is like a reprocessing therapy that helps people who have had traumatic experiences. There are people who have lost people to murder, you know, to awful accidents, or just like honestly to cancer, where there's been a real trauma that you know, there's a famous book out there that's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's about how the body really holds on to this trauma. And as somebody who generally cares about people, I would hope that you would absorb that message and then try and do something about that, because you don't deserve to live that way.
I want to talk about grief in terms of grieving a person, and maybe what a lot of us are processing with COVID is the grief of this life lost.
Yeah.
That if COVID hadn't happened, all the things that we had in the works or are about to happen just poof, disappeared. Mm-hmm. And collectively, I don't think any of us have actually faced that and processed that grief of the life that we didn't get to live because this global pandemic happened and life is forever changed.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that grief, while still grief, is a little bit different, and maybe what parts of the book you think would be the most helpful in starting to process that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think that a lot of us this is a very divisive society in which we're living right now, and I think it sucks. I can't stand it. I can't stand how we're fighting over either a piece of material over our face, or what political affiliation we are, or what books should be acceptable or not, or what gender you should be or not. It's oh my gosh, I wish we could just cut each other a break, because the truth is that all we have right now is each other. And grief is the most universal experience we have. And to me, it's the great leveler. And it's an opportunity for us to share our stories in ways that are really raw and really open. You can share your story with somebody with whom you may not have anything in common or think you have anything in common. And by the end, you can realize oh, I literally didn't think that I would ever want to talk to this person, but we found this thread. And now maybe I don't think they're the coolest, or I hate their politics or whatever, but maybe I'll cut them a little bit more of a break. Maybe I'll see that they're just a human person and everyone has a story, and I'll go a little bit more easy on them, or I'll be willing to listen to a little bit more to where they're coming from. And so in a real kind of, yes, Pollyanna-ish way, I do believe that talking about our losses can be something that pulls us all together, because what more do we have right now than each other? I believe that community is the salve we desperately need during these times. We're in the third year of a pandemic that has been so incredibly destructive. Obviously, in the news, we all know 1 million people dead in this country alone. The real number is 1.2 million at least. There's a whole bereavement multiplier thing, which is that's 9 million people in this country who are grieving a COVID loss, not to mention all the other death loss that's going on, not to mention what you mentioned about the loss of our identities, of our futures, our perceived futures, of the roles that we had, or the addition of all these unexpected roles. Maybe some of us had to parent full-time and be Zoom teachers and work, and or we've lost coping mechanisms. We can't go to that class anymore that was allowing us to keep our shit together for an hour every week, or brunch with that person because they're immunocompromised and they're scared to come out. So we've lost so much, and on top of that, we're still in trauma mode, right? Things haven't died down. We're just a month or two in between variants at any given time. And so right when we feel we can maybe relax a bit, the trauma response goes up, this fight or flight response, and it's exhausting. We're totally burned out, not to mention all the stuff that's going on in society and politics. And so I feel there is a crossover from if we get good at talking about our own grief here in this book as it relates to death loss, it just automatically spills over in our ability to talk about other losses. We have more empathy for ourselves. We have more empathy for others. We're more open to having these conversations. And, we're more open to acknowledging that, things are hard, And so, yeah, that's how I really feel. I will end with one quick anecdote, and that question that I just loved this. It was Beto O'Rourke a few years ago, and I think his name is Will Hurd. They're both Congressmen, Texas. Yeah. And he was a Republican, and Beto is, we all know, he's a Democrat. And they were trying to get to D.C. for a vote somewhere, and there was a big snowstorm, and they had to rent a car to get to wherever they were going. Instead of taking an hour flight, they had to drive 9-10 hours, whatever. And they ended up documenting their entire road trip, and they we both love death metal, we both love this, and they were on polar opposite sides of the aisle. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that they vote politically together. Probably will never happen. But they talked about how spending that time together and realizing the things they had in common made them more empathic to each other. And like, oh, like, I don't think this guy is like a dick. Like, I don't just see him as like this politician on the other side of the aisle. It's Will who likes Megadeth, you know? And I do think that helps when you can personalize this a little bit.
And what I loved about, because I watched a couple hours of that conversation, was
awesome,
it was one, I was like, this is like the West Wing. It's giving me all the good, happy feelings. But it goes to show when you are just curious about why someone views an issue in that particular way. And in Will Hurt's case, he was a CIA operative who had been deployed in the field. He has certain reasons and experiences for why he votes or proposes legislation. Same with Beto. And when you listen without judgment and you listen with an open mind, not to have your mind changed, but just to learn, I think we could all embrace a little bit more of a Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental, especially when it comes to grief, because like you said, that does spill out into everything else in life. So my last question for you before I turn it over to the audience is, besides buying people a copy of this wonderful book, as well as your first book, how can people show up and help those maybe not early on in the grief stage when we think to show up for people, but later on? Because as you said, this is a lifelong marathon. Yeah. This isn't something you ever get over. So how do we support people who are maybe more experienced in their grief journey, but are still grieving?
Yeah, so we did an event here at Saks that was mostly focused on grief in the workplace in January. I think that's online because I talked at length about like supporting people at work. So I won't repeat myself there, but I will talk about really great ways in which you can be there for somebody in your life you care about across the long run. Because like you said, it's not just like, when the casseroles are fresh in that first week or month or even year. It's like 6 years down the line when maybe your friend is having a tough moment because she's approaching the age her mom died. And that's new for her, and that feels weird and uncomfortable and kind of thought-provoking, and she's having a tough moment. Or it's like, maybe when, your another friend's child, hits kindergarten age and their other child died, in kindergarten. There are just so many different things, and there's a lot of like resurfaced grief that can happen, and there's like new types of grief that can happen as we move through our grief experience, because like I said before, a lot of grief is a very living thing, and so it's going to shift along with, how our identities shift and how our life experiences pop up. And so I think that like if we're talking about a friend, like just remembering that just because that other person isn't talking about their person so much maybe anymore, it doesn't mean they forgot they existed. It doesn't mean that the love isn't still there, that the pining, the yearning. There's this beautiful Portuguese word called saudade, and it's this like longing. Like you'll always live with that longing, that sad, nostalgic longing for what could have been, and not what just what was. And that's like a really sad thing to live with, no matter what. And I think that if you can remember that, like if you can really put that into coding in your like emotions for that person, you'll be better at continuing like bring up that person's name, say that person's name. Like my mom's name is Shelby. I get to say it a lot in these media interviews, but I don't like walk around every day and be like, Shelby this, Shelby that. I love saying my mom's name. It's a happy name. Whose name's Shelby? Like, no, like steel magnolias and like, who knows? But I love being able to say her name. It makes me feel like her energy is with me. I love that there is a section in the book on bespoke holidays that people have come up with. Like my friend Amanda Johns, her dad died in December, right after we graduated college. And it was such a hard thing for her for many years. Like imagine your dad's, his birthday is December 17th, and then it's like Christmas, right? For her, it was so hard. She dreaded December. And then on year 3 or 4, she's like, you know what? My dad loved a Bombay Sapphire and a Big Mac. And so like, she sent an email. She's like, can you guys please have something like that today? It's Dave's birthday. Just do it in his memory. Like do it and send me a picture of what you did. And so it's become this like huge thing. It's like 15 years later or whatever, and like we all look forward to her dad's birthday so that we can eat like the worst crap for ourselves and do it it's like we're doing it for, no, it's like God's work. We're doing it for Dave. And then we do it and we post it on Facebook, and like people who don't even know her or know Dave do it. And it's so nice because it's turned this day that she's dreaded into something that is not like, oh, I'm so excited for my dad's birthday and I don't miss him. No, it's always bittersweet. But she feels like she's turned it into a communal thing where she's shown people who will never meet her dad what his spirit was like. You know, she introduced his memory to them, and she said, hey, this person existed. Like, you need to know that this person existed in my life, and it's still meaningful to me 15, 20 years on. And she's turned it into this beautiful communal thing. And I just think it's really nice to just remember and be open to participating in stuff like that with friends and family of yours. Because the memory, the longing, the saujaji, it does not go away. It doesn't mean that life can't be awesome. I mean, I'm really lucky, I'm privileged, I'm so fortunate in life in many ways, but I will always have a melancholy running through me in some way, shape, or form. How could I not, you know?
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us. We're going to turn it over to questions, so yes.
One thing I can't understand, if you're wearing seatbelts, how could you get killed? It's supposed to protect you.
Yeah. I don't know. They just didn't.
Can you tell me that your writing process, Rebecca? Rebecca, I'm so interested in your writing process. Do you do this morning, when the kids are in school, at night, when they're sleeping? How do you approach your
A through E.
process?
So thank you for that question, Allison. Thank you for coming today. And I would just like to say, like, this is my friend Allison Gilbert, who has many amazing books and has incredible work in the grief space as well. She's phenomenal, and I highly recommend her work. And has always been in my corner, and it really means a lot. So my writing has been like, I mean, you could probably have the same answer as me. I thought, like, we have two little kids. I don't know, whenever I can hide from them, or like whenever like they can sit on my lap and I'm like, I can still reach my keyboard. It was hard. It was hard because I wrote this during last winter, during the depths of like the first COVID winter. It was a very hard winter. It was very isolating. I was really down. Why wouldn't I be? It was an election season. It was hard, you know, like January 6th happened. And it was lonely. And I found myself mostly writing at night, late at night, like after everybody was asleep. I could work during the day, and I did, but some of my best thinking was when I wasn't like worrying about like, oh, the news cycle and the rest of the day, and like, oh, do I have to like, I picked them up from school and this and that. And so that's where like most of my good stuff came out. Even like when I was sleeping, I'm a big fan of my notes app. And I know you're not supposed to look at your phone at 2 a.m. I don't take my own advice in the book, and I would like grab it and be like, oh, here's a thought. And then I would also go on a lot of hikes and long winter walks to like unstick my brain, and I would just kind of take notes from that. But yeah, at the end, I don't know, it was 24/7 because I was on deadline. You know what that is.
This sounds very familiar, but also
We were texting each
we
other.
were texting each other.
We were both on book deadline.
We were both like, it wasn't as much accountability as it was just checking in to make sure the other one was alive and reminding each other to drink water and eat something green and move our bodies. But yeah, it's an all-encompassing thing. I think both of us had aggressive deadlines for our books and a very short period of time in which to write them. So you just know that it's not going to last forever, so you do whatever you can in that moment to cram it all.
Yeah, true.
Thanks so much for this. I can't wait to read the book. So my partner lost his dad in November. It was also my son's first experience with losing like a very close loved one. And like you said, like many people, my partner really puts his dad now on a pedestal, even though they had a very, very complicated relationship. Also, like a lot of times with cancer, like before he passed away, there was a lot to do. There were like hospital visits to organize and for to prepare, and people to schedules to do, and then afterwards it's kind of okay, let's just go back to normal. And I can't, I don't think it's my place to tell my partner, oh, you're grieving wrong, you should go to therapy, you should, you should do all the things that would probably help him, but it's his process. But how can a person like me be there for him without judging him and with like giving him the space when he doesn't give himself the space?
I think you're like an amazing partner, by the way, because I think it's hard. First of all, I think it's very hard to, and I want to give credit to all the partners who are supporting partners who are grieving, because I have one, and it's not easy, it's not easy. And look, I'm going to be very generalizing here. Like, I'm doing a huge stereotype. I do think that, like, men and women, if we're just dividing it up into the binaries, they grieve differently. They have a tendency to grieve differently. Men tend to be a little bit more insular, like the depression, from everything I've read. Again, not a therapist, but like I've worked with many, like it can come off more as anger or like withdrawal. Like they might want to like focus on a project instead of like, I want to talk about my feelings, and it could be feeling it's like a little harder to reach them. And so, yeah, there's a piece on our website on modernloss.com that's called Dude, Where's My Grief? And it's written by a male therapist about like, this is like how to help. And so you might want to check that out, because I thought it was a very helpful piece. And I do think like if, it is hard, because you can't, it's like when my dad was like, after my mom died, I could tell that his eyesight wasn't that great. And like, I was like, maybe we should you shouldn't drive so much. And he's like, I was like, good luck with that. So I felt like very impotent, but I knew what the right thing to do was, but like, I couldn't make him do it. And I had to wait until he like got into a fender bender. And then like they took away his license because his eyesight was bad. And it's almost like you can't make him do it unless he wants to. And that is so hard, especially if you have a child. So hard. But I think that like an important thing is to just keep talking about it. You don't have to like prod and pry, but just keep on talking about it. Like, just don't ignore verbally the fact that his dad died, and that was a complicated relationship, and maybe eventually, like, he'll be willing to speak with someone about it, because maybe he doesn't want to talk to you, but keep talking about it. Not like hammering it over his head, but like, don't give up,
Getting
Yes.
back to my former question, when he had seatbelts, was he sitting in the back or the front?
I'm just going to be honest that like I actually would prefer not to speak about those details, because I don't think it's very germane to the conversation that we're having today. But that's thank you.
I just wanted to learn something from my colleague.
Yeah, I'd rather not address that. That's okay. Thank you.
I love your concept of apples to oranges when maybe multiple people are grieving the same person.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you can best support maybe your other family members as you're all going through that common grief, and also how to not like quantify someone else's relationship.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard.
I lost my grandmother 6 months ago, and I think my family's doing a bit of, oh well, you haven't seen him in this long, or my grandmother lost her partner of 50 years, but I lost my idol of 30 years.
Right, right.
How do you kind of avoid those narratives and also try to support each other as you're going through that?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. And I'm so sorry to hear about this. It sucks, and it's like I think that especially in families, and even like in groups of friends, like who's seen like Dear Evan Hansen, right? Like it's all about like, oh, like he was my friend. No, he's my friend. Like it's like, oh no, but I knew him better. It's like, oh my God, we all get the crap award, okay? We all get the crappiest award because we all had to lose this person. So I think that the more we kind of can try, and it's going to be hard for like everyone in your family to absorb this message, but it might help you to remember the reality is that there's literally no grief. It's like everybody loses here. Everyone has lost someone. Everyone has lost, a relationship with like a two living person situation dynamic. And it's hard because like you said, like maybe it's like, well, it's like, oh, your grandmother lost her partner of like this many decades and you only knew your grandfather for this long. It doesn't matter. Like it's still grief. And so, as I said earlier, if it feels like grief to you, it's grief, and it's worth respecting and acknowledging and examining and caring for. And I know that not everybody is not like capable, but not willing to look at that, because grief can bring out the best in us. It can bring out the worst in us. It doesn't make us bad people. It can just bring out like all of our extremes. And we don't always, like the best of us doesn't always align with like the best in someone else that's being brought out. And so I think that it's just the only thing that you can really do is share this, what I'm saying, with your family and say, we all lost him. And like, I get it, like I totally get it. Like, it must be so hard. Like you lost your partner, you lost your dad. and you have these childhood memories, like, but I just loved him. I loved my time with him. Like, he was really special to me in these ways, and like, I was hoping that he would X, Y, and Z. Like, I was really hoping that we'd get those experiences. And I just think that, like, by talking instead of like arguing, not saying like, well, this is more important, or this is more important, that's not really saying anything. You know, people get bogged down. It's like when they fight over estates, and my lawyer always said it always comes down to like grandma's rocking chair. It's not about the money, it's like the emotional items that are tied to the meaning of a relationship. Your only ability is to just express in words your story and your feelings, and then see if that like resonates with them, because it might, you know, really make them listen to you and make them think. I do believe in the power of that, I really do.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us here today, and thank you everyone for coming. And there.
Thanks, Hitha. Thanks, Rach, for bringing me in. Thanks.
There's lunch and copies of the book in the back, so please fuel yourselves and fill your heart with what is one of my favorite books this year.
Oh my gosh.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was great.